Hello, everyone. My name is Gerard Robinson, and welcome to the kickoff of 2021 for the Center for Education, Leadership, and Culture series. As you know, during last year, I would invite guests every month to come on and have a conversation about education in an entire different set of contexts. Well, today we're going to talk about back to school. Now, before I do that, I probably should say why I'm wearing glasses, not because I'm trying to be cool. As many of you know, we get to a point in life where we have to have an annual checkup. I had my annual eye checkup, had my eyes and pupils dilated, and I can barely see. And so part of this is to help with the lighting and also to make sure that I can't see the things that I can. So I wanted to put that out there up front. So today, we have an opportunity to talk to four leaders. All four of these leaders, I had an opportunity to spend time with in July when they traveled to Charlottesville, Virginia, to be a part of a workshop that we hosted at the Institute, the foundation, to talk about the work we're doing in character education. So what better way to kick off the school year than to talk to four leaders who are working in the field of education. And so I'm going to just introduce everyone quickly, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So we've got Ellen Bartling, who is actually from Milwaukee, a place that I used to work. She's the executive director of the Hope Schools, and she'll tell us more about that. Probably one of the larger private school networks, but I won't steal her thunder. I'll let her go in, so it's good to see her. We got Summer Wood, who is the principal of the Jenkins Preparatory School in Tennessee. She is doing some great work, and she'll tell us more about her work. We've got Superintendent D.T. McGee. He's in Iowa. He's going to talk about the work of being a superintendent. He's in a rural area. He's got a lot of different dynamics as it relates to economics, distance, and others. I was glad to have him here. And then from the big city of Chicago, we've got Rashid Bell, who's at KIPP 1. He's a leader there, but he's also worked in Chicago public schools in different areas. And so let me welcome all of you to the first kickoff session for Back to School, and thank you for joining me. So first thing I want to do is give you an opportunity to tell us who are going to watch this later who you are. So DT, let me go to you. Who's DT? What attracted you to education, and how did you become a leader?
So I wanted my summers off because that's true. I've always enjoyed working with students and kids, and so that was the attraction. I started off as a business major, and I kept feeling that pull, and so I transferred over to the College of Education from the College of Business, and so I could work with kids and teach kids. And I remained a business education major, so that's why I got into education.
And being a superintendent, that business background is coming in handy. I'm pretty sure it is.
Absolutely.
Well, since we got some laughter from Ellen, who also has some experience in the world of superintendent leadership. Who's Ellen, and how did you get involved in education and leadership?
I actually am marking my 41st year in education. Mm-hmm. And I started as a high school English and history teacher in the public schools in Wisconsin. And I've done nearly everything possible in the schools besides being the custodian. And so I moved up through the ranks as a high school principal and a curriculum director and as a superintendent. And then I had the opportunity to switch courses and decided that I would give private schools a go. And that is how I ended up leading the Hope Christian schools in the city of Milwaukee, as well as in the city of Racine. Education was a family business. Everyone in my family is an educator, and I still define myself as an educator.
Thank you. Rashid, let's kick it to you. Same question.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I would say I kind of backed into education. For me, it was simply just about just an opportunity to give kids an experience that I didn't have growing up. And I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to be in a place where they're empowered, where they're learning and growing, but also having fun. And so for me, I was a teacher in Newark Public Schools where I grew up, where I was from Newark, New Jersey, and I was a teacher there. But I guess I was doing some good work. And then I was approached to join a principal preparation program called New Leaders for New Schools. And that's what brought me to Chicago, Illinois. And from that point forward, I've been working in traditional Chicago public schools, and now I've been with KIPP Chicago for the last 10 years as a founding assistant principal. And then I was able to found KIPP 1 back in 2015 as our second elementary school. And I've been doing that ever since and really, really enjoying my time there.
Good stuff. I know some of the founding members of New Leaders for New Schools, good organization. Last but not least, Summer, same question for you.
Wow. So I feel my story resonates with so many other things that others have said already, but originally my major I was a business major, and I graduated as a business major, but wasn't fulfilled after doing some interning experience and just seeing the trajectory. Different people have different passions, and I felt like that corporate passion was not my passion. And so I did an alternative certification program and went into as a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. And once there, understood and knew that my passion was education. And from there, being a classroom teacher, I really enjoyed working with teachers. So helping teachers teach teachers with best practices and things of that nature. So I became an instructional coach, which I loved. I think that's probably been my favorite education job, because I felt like I had such impact on so many more classrooms and with teachers, and I could just focus on instruction. And, to wrap it up, I was one of those people that said I would never be a principal. Never, never, never. I don't want that job. But I definitely feel purposed in the work that I'm currently doing at FH Jenkins Preparatory School, where I am the school leader there. And as was mentioned earlier with DT, I am now using my business degree, my education degree, my non-existent IT degree, every kind of degree needed in order to make sure that, our school is continuing to grow. So that is a little, the Cliff Notes version of how I got into education.
And it's very interesting how majors often don't align with passion, but it will come up later on in life. Mm-hmm. And the different roles between public and private. And a couple of you have done public and then switched to private. Cities you've covered, so this is going to be really good. So DT, let me go to you. You're a superintendent in what we would call a rural district, although in your state it may be a large system. Talk to us about Norwalk, number of students, the makeup, and what you do in that role, and particularly since you opened in person, is it hybrid? All those good things.
Yeah, so we're migrating from where we historically were more of a bedroom rural community to now we are this blend of, we have students that live out in acreages. We still have some farms, horse farms especially because of the topography. Okay. We're now transitioning to a suburban school district. And then we have an urban aspect as well, because we are right up against Des Moines, and so the largest city in Iowa. And so we get this interesting blend of kind of those three flavors for a school district. And we are one of the fastest growing school districts in Iowa. We're up to 3,390 students in kindergarten through 12th grade as of today. But that started the school year, so enrollment is changing. And we, so with that, we're rapidly growing. And we're seeing an increase where we were predominantly a white population. We've gradually, now we're at about 13% of our student population that's non-white. And that we anticipate over the next several years is going to grow up to about 20%. So we're seeing a demographic shift. We're also seeing a demographic shift in terms of some of our affluence, but not like matching up with a lot of Iowa. We're seeing our affluence level increase instead of decrease. And so that presents some unique challenges. We are in person. State of Iowa last year, we could offer online options. That's been taken away unless we're an approved provider, and we chose not to pursue that this year as a school district. We have a mask mandate ban in the state of Iowa, but that's in juxtaposition to the federal mandate of masks being required on school buses, public transportation. And so we have mask requirement on our school buses, but then students get to school and they can take them off. So it's an interesting blend of a lot of different factors in our district: urban, suburban, rural. Of course, like a lot of districts, we're experiencing some extremes in political ideologies and belief systems, whether it's around masks, mandates, or vaccinations or other items. So it's definitely an interesting time to be a superintendent. The last year I've been able to dust off my crisis response skills. And you have an opportunity to use leadership skills at this point in time.
Two follow-up questions. One, your mask, banning the mask mandate, was that the state legislature? And second question, for the demographic change you have right now, what's fueling that?
So the mask mandate ban was passed by our legislature during the last week of school, or leading into the last week of school.
Okay.
We had a mask mandate here in our district, and then the last week of school during the 2021 school year, we had to rescind that. And so that was an interesting process. And so that's legislature, governor. And I think it's just that we're reflective of our country in terms of our demographics are shifting in the country, and our school district is seeing that. And we've done a dive into our demographics as we're looking into that, our data, and our two biggest non-white groups are Latinx students and students that identify with two or more ethnicities or races. And that, you go to a community near us, and that's going to be different, right? And then one little interesting fact for us is we've had a Somali community establish themselves locally. So we have Somali families, and then of course they have language challenges coming to the country. So we've been able to support them. So it's just a very unique, and like I said, you go and talk to other superintendents, they're going to tell similar stories with different details, right?
Got it. And you have the economic, because you're bordering your largest city, you're seeing the economic push. So let's go to you, Summer. You're in a big city, you're at a private school. Talk to us about Jenkins, makeup, affiliation, all those good things.
Sure, yeah. FH Jenkins is a member school of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. So we are a private religious school. We have been in existence in Nashville since 1909. Our school was established under this concept. When you're thinking about laws like Plessy versus Ferguson, you're thinking about Jim Crow, et cetera. Our school was established so that parents could send their children, their Black children, to a school that would foster in them awareness of self, positive self-awareness, as well as the religious spiritual component. And that mission has not stopped since 1909. So we are a predominantly Black institution. I nickname us, we're an HBI, a historically Black institution. We're not a college or university, but we have this similar history, right? And the similar makeup and reasoning for why we exist. We're very passionate about what we do here in the city and for our students and for our families. As every institution has, their ups and downs, and our school has had its peaks and valleys, as you can imagine, since 1909. But currently, we're growing. We're becoming somewhat of a beacon in our city for where young Black children can be educated, especially as these states are going through this political critical race theory, even though I'm not going to dig into that deeply, but that these legislatures, including Tennessee, are having these conversations and making these decisions about what can be taught and how it can be taught in schools. And so, some of our people in our community are concerned about that and are looking for places where their students can go and be nurtured and can talk about the history of our nation. As mentioned, right now, education in a pandemic is unbelievable. I mean, the workload is unreal. And our teachers are working super hard and they're trying to be there for students academically, social, emotionally, et cetera, all under this banner of uncertainty, which is today we may be in the building and tomorrow we may not due to a COVID case, and or having to shut down, et cetera. So we've always said that educators need to be flexible, but what we're calling them to do at this moment is on a whole different level. And it's tough, so we're making it. We're trying to always provide excellence, but it's challenging right now.
At your school, at Seventh-day Adventist, are the majority of the students part of the faith, and what percentage of your students qualify free or reduced price lunch?
So our school is interesting in that we're almost at about 50-50 when it comes to children who are members or their families are members of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination and those that are not. And so as an institution, as our school, we are totally open and desirous of that, in that we have a mission to educate students and to help them grow spiritually. So it doesn't really matter to us what denomination they're from when they attend our school. As it relates to the percentage, our percentage of students who are on free and reduced lunch currently is quite low. I think we're probably at around maybe 10% or so.
Good. Mask policy. What's the policy now, and were you open last school year, hybrid, combination?
Yeah. So last year we did a series of things. At the beginning of the year, the numbers in Nashville were quite high. And so we were watching that, looking at the hospitalization rates, all of those things, those indicators. And so the first month of school, we were all virtual. And then from that time on, every quarter, parents could decide whether or not they wanted their children to remain home or come into the building. And coming into the building required masking, temperature checks. You even had to have COVID test, a negative COVID test to come to school. So that was throughout the entire year. Last year, I can tell you by fourth quarter, many more parents were comfortable. The vaccine had come out. Some of them had been eligible. And I think some of them were just ready to have their children be out of the house after doing virtual that long. And then this year, we don't have that same setup in which you just get to choose. We are back in school. Same thing, masking mandatory, temperature checks mandatory, negative COVID test to enter school mandatory, not daily, but at like big breaks and things of that nature, it's still mandatory. And what we do is if there is a student, for example, that tests positive, they didn't come in contact, let's say over the weekend or something, they didn't come in contact, or for some reason someone in their family tested positive and they have to stay home, we are set up for virtual so that they can still join class. So we still utilize those tools so that children are not missing out due to quarantine, et cetera. So for example, last week, the whole building was quarantined, but we were able to shift quickly to virtual for a week, do what we need to do, get test results back, deeply sanitize, and then come back this week.
Got it. Before I kick it over to Ellen, DT, I know that you're going to transition off. Anything you want to share with us before you transition to your next piece?
I would just echo what Summer said, that we being fully back in person this year and not having an online option, we've resolved some of the complexity we were dealing with last year. But I don't think it can be underestimated to say how hard our teachers and our cooks and our bus drivers and our associates and our administrators worked last year. The amount of decisions that had to be made, how quickly we had to move from one model to the next. It was a really heavy lift. And it just, to me, points out the amazing people that work in education, how ethical and professional our profession is. It was truly a sight to behold, and it made me incredibly proud and incredibly tired. And so, and that fatigue has gone into this year. I'd say we're in recovery mode, but we're still working hard, and it's because of love for kids, right? That's why we made it through, I think, is that we have people that show up for kids every day.
DT, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being part of our group. Look forward to talking to you at another point, and our prayers are with you and everyone else involved.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for allowing me to join in. Sorry I have to cut it short tonight.
No problem. So, Ellen, let's go to you. Talk to us about Hope, how it got started, You're in more than one place. What is it?
So our Hope schools here in the city of Milwaukee, and we have one in the city of Racine, are part of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, which allows parents in the city of Milwaukee who meet certain requirements to take their child from the public district and give them the opportunity to attend private Christian education. And the state then gives us a certain amount of money per student that would have gone to the public district. We receive that to provide an education. Currently, we're serving approximately 3,500 students in the center of the city as well as the north side. Milwaukee is sadly infamous for being one of the most segregated cities in the country, and it still remains in many ways that in that situation. And so we are serving those African-American students in the zip codes that don't have the opportunity to attend high quality public schools. That's basically our mission. And so this year we started school with all in-person students. We do have the option of virtual if a parent insists on it. However, we don't recommend it based on results, particularly academic and social emotional situations from last year. And we had optional masking for this year. But I will tell you that within the zip codes that we serve, we see the highest percentage of positive tests, probably related to the Delta variant, as well as the lowest percentage of vaccinated adults. And so yesterday, I made the decision that all of our schools go back to requiring everyone to be masked. We still maintained our sanitation and services as we had them last year, as well as hand sanitizers, bottle filling stations, all of those procedures we kept. And so our goal this year is to both keep students and staff safe, but also not close our schools to massive quarantines if we can avoid it. And hence, that was the cause for the change. So we are a one-to-one initiative school network. And so all students were issued Chromebooks last year and again this year to help with the situation where a student has to be quarantined or a parent really is still afraid of sending their child to school and would prefer that the child learn virtually from the home. So that is sort of where we are at currently.
Got it. And it's interesting, you as a leader looking at the data and just making a decision on the spot. We're going to pivot and make this happen. And so, and you look at it and said, here's where we are. I was reading some data in New York Times, Washington Post, local papers here in Virginia, and in some of our communities, African-American communities in particular, still have low vaccination rates. And there's all kinds of questions on how do we address it? What can we do more of those things to make it happen? You have 3,500 students, so you've got a nice block. Your school, the Hope Network, is primarily Lutheran, if I'm not mistaken. Are the majority of your students Lutheran or a mix like we'll have with summer schools?
Our history is with the Lutheran Church, but today we recognize ourselves as Christian. Okay. We have students that are spiritual. Some belong to Lutheran churches. Some come to us and they have no spiritual background whatsoever. So we don't limit it to believers. And And so we try to bring Christ and spiritual support to all of our students and all of our families.
And it's worth noting for those who are watching that the program she's talking about, the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, is the country's oldest urban-based, what people would call a voucher program, but a scholarship program in the country. A number of legal challenges to it. The state Supreme Court found it constitutional, and they're just doing some good work in that area. So I'll come back to you. So Rashid, let's go to you in Chicago. Tell us more about KIPP One. Are there other KIPPs? I mean, there's some, but how do they relate to the other schools in the area? But more importantly, the demographics of your school, how things open, what was it like compared to last year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, KIPP One. We are part of the KIPP Chicago network of charter schools here in the city of Chicago. We have a total of 8 campuses now. KIPP One Primary was actually the second elementary campus that we opened, and I believe somebody mentioned it earlier. I was asked to open up KIPP One about 3 different times before I actually decided to go aboard with it, because I was like, I believe it was summer that said I wasn't interested in being a principal. However, we opened the school because I had to ask myself a question. What if somebody else said no to the kids that we serve? And so I recognized that it was bigger than me. So that is why, honest to goodness, why we opened up KIPP One Primary. And it's interesting. I feel so many connections because our school was also founded on this ideal or this value of hope. And we breathe that in everything that we do. Honor, optimism, perseverance, enthusiasm, and we believe love is in the center of all of those things. And so KIPP One Primary was built upon that concept long before it was a popular concept, particularly within KIPP. But we try to strike a very healthy balance of high academics, but also really centering on the social, emotional, and character development of our students. And so I say all that to say, leading. So I look at this thing in 2 different ways. We had to pivot and lead during the pandemic, but we're also now currently leading in a pandemic. And so last year during the pandemic, we had to essentially create a virtual school from nothing, much like a lot of people did. And that was extremely challenging. But I would say our teachers really just galvanized our community, our staff, our teachers, and everybody, just came together with, I would just drop this nugget that, like, whatever you do, what made it easier for us, it wasn't easy, but what made it easier for us is that we have decision-making principles that we ascribe to for every decision that we make. And safety is our number one. And then keep trying to continue to build a beloved community is our second principle. And so we try to operate with that frame of mind and mindset. And so we were fully virtual for 3/4 of the year last year. And it wasn't easy. Again, we had some of our teachers, and we had to teach them how to use the computer, how to use Zoom, how to get kids logged in. But I think we did a really good job. We actually were able to cover 75% of the standards that we would have covered in a normal year. We saw less growth than we usually do, but there was still growth amongst reading and math. And so I was really proud of what we did last year. And now this year, leading in the pandemic, we are actually fully back. We again, keeping safety as our North Star, but a beloved community as what we strongly believe in. We have a lot of protocols and safety measures in place, like masking, universal masking for adults and students, and anybody that enters the building, temperature screenings. Our students are COVID screened once a week at least. All of our unvaccinated teachers are screened 3 times a week. Again, it's all about keeping safety again as our number one decision-making principle. And what we have found is we're still able, through masking, through keeping some distancing in the classroom, keeping kids in the same pod and homeroom. We don't mix pods and things of that nature, has been really helpful. And not knock on wood, we haven't had a case yet since we've been open, and I'm really happy about that. And we're hopefully going to continue to do that. But one of the things that has worked well for us in terms of COVID We also require all of our teachers to have seating charts so that we can contact trace very easily. And for teacher burnout, our teachers are working so hard to continue this. We also were able to hire a COVID response teacher that is able to cover in the case of a teacher has to quarantine or provide some extra work for any students that are quarantined, that need to be in quarantine. And so adding those additional measures and layers has produced the safety that we've been trying to reach, but also it's allowed us to continue to keep that beloved community. And we haven't, we don't have to close an entire pod anymore. We can just have those few students in close contact be in quarantine. And so those are some of the things that have really, really, really helped us. And our parents seem to be really happy so far. I mean, obviously we can't eliminate we can't eliminate COVID, but we definitely have been able to mitigate its effect on what we're trying to do on a daily basis.
Thank you for sharing that. All three of you talked about teachers. As a leader, the people who are doing the work every day, either online or when the doors are closed, are your educators. What have you done for them in terms of either emotional support during the last year? And what lessons can principals like you and leaders like you learn from some of the things you're doing? Because a lot of my friends who are school leaders are trying to figure out what can we do and draw from others to learn from, because, I think it was you, Summer, who said that, we're asking teachers to be flexible, but now we're asking them to be contortionists in ways that schools of education, and I attended 2 schools of education, in ways that it just didn't train us to do. So, anyone can jump in. What are you doing for the emotional stability of your teachers?
One thing that I did last year that, I don't know, it just hit me. I felt going into the year, after having had that stint in the spring, going into that new year, I said, this is going to be really challenging. I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but I felt that this is going to be really challenging, and this is going to have so many question marks on it. It's so unpredictable. Who knows what this is going to look like? So I actually purchased journals for all of my teachers, and we weekly journaled what was going on. Like you didn't have to say everything that happened, but I gave them time for us to collectively sit, and I just gave us some time, some quiet time, and we just wrote about whatever we wanted to write about that week and what was happening. And so we did that throughout the entire school year. And at the end of the year, we shared some of our, compare what you wrote from day one with where you are now, reflect. And that was kind of the theme. It was like, we got to reflect through this. We cannot just bulldoze through it, because there's going to be so much to do that we're going to actually feel like we don't have time to reflect. But if we don't reflect, it could actually be disappointing to us in the end, because we won't remember all of the things that we went through and all of the challenges that we faced that we thought were the worst at that moment. And then we discovered other things that were the worst. And then we can also write about the amazing things that were birthed out of it, right? So for us, one thing that, and even the teachers talked about how much they appreciated that, which was just giving them the time to just sit and reflect on what is happening and not pretending like this is not hard. I think we have sometimes as educators, we want to just always be the rah-rah people, and we want to rah-rah our way out of reality, right? Like we sometimes don't want to face like, this is hard, this is tough, let's talk about it, name it, all that stuff. We're trying to put a positive spin on everything to get us through. But I think sometimes what helps to get us through emotionally is just resting in it and saying, this is hard. This is crazy. I can't believe I've been asked to do this. Oh my goodness, this child never logs in, whatever the case may be. But then after we process all of that, then let's figure out some solutions, right? But we got to have the time to reflect and just sit in what is actually happening to us. Like literally, teachers are not immune from what is happening. It is happening to them, just like it's happening to, and they're scared too. They don't want COVID, and so it's just a whole lot of things. So we stop to process emotions and reflect.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
What we did was we did extra training to when we moved into virtual, because nobody was really prepared to do that. And I think that helped teachers a lot. We did a lot of collaboration amongst our campuses so that when one campus found something that worked really well, we made sure that that was replicated in the other campuses. At the end of last year, it was decided that all of the teachers, TAs, etc., would be given a COVID bonus in terms of financially. And that was very nice, I think, for all of the teachers to understand that we recognize the amount of work this took. And then on a more personal level, I had the principals make sure that each week they delivered something special to each teacher's classroom, whether it was a bottle of lotion or it was some kind of treat or just some kind of funny card, ramping up everyone's spirit. And that served to be a really good way to show support for our teachers, and they loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did a few different things. One thing that we did, kind of to what Summer was pointing out, is just have the opportunity to just really. So we just stopped and paused, right, and just look at like what actually is the most important thing to do right now in this moment, because obviously we're going through the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, but on the backdrop of that, our country was going through a reckoning. It's still going through a reckoning, and so particularly as a school that's in Chicago that's serving Black and brown kids, we had to also wrestle with that. So we had to make the time for reflection, to pause and just say like, hey, we recognize that we're going through this COVID pandemic, but we're also going through that pandemic of racism as well. And how are those two things actually harming our kids, and what's harming them the most, right? Are they equal? So we had to wrestle with a lot of those different questions. But I think what was powerful though is that we wrestled with them. I'm not gonna say we agreed on every little thing, but we wrestled with them and we wrestled with them together. But what it brought us is understanding of like what actually matters most. And we were able to like sit down with our teachers, relook at our schedule, relook at what we're offering, and say like, okay, some of these things don't really matter anymore. What actually matters, right? Like kids need to know how to read. And so we got rid of some of that fluff, and we actually put in time where we're throughout in our schedule, throughout the day, we have time for just honestly, like we call them like clubs. Every teacher picked a club and just had fun with kids again, outside of just the academics. And that just brought a lot of just joy to teachers and to kids and to families. And what that did was, teachers were able to share something that brings them joy to kids. That was really, really healthy and positive. Another thing we did to try to stay as normal or close to normal as possible, we did a needs assessment with our staff and say, like, what do you need? What do you want to learn? And so we were able to still, we hired a chef that did cooking demonstrations for our teachers every Wednesday, or we switched it up. We did financial literacy courses, how to manage your wealth. So some of our teachers had a little bit more money during the pandemic because they wasn't traveling. And so we partnered with a financial institution that's giving them free money advice. We partnered with a yoga studio that did yoga classes, trying to meet the social emotional health of our teachers as well, was really, really powerful. Then the third thing that we did was just identify, like try to Ellen's point, we did something special for our teachers. We tried to do something. So we used to have after school meetings like 4 days out of the week. We cut it down to only 1 day out of the week. Huge win for teachers. They were super happy about that. Super happy. Once a week, we surprise one grade level with late starts. Like you can miss the morning, we'll cover your classes. Just whatever they needed to just put a smile on their face. We definitely increased the swag for teacher appreciation. We broke the bank a little bit, but we had a little more money to spend. And so they got just a tremendous amount of swag and things of that nature. And so we try to meet their physical needs, give them lunch and breakfast, their social emotional needs, and then also just the need for that community. Those three things working in conjunction with one another really helped our teachers and got them through, and it's continued to get them through. And like I said before, we hired an extra staff member so that they don't feel super stretched as well, a COVID response teacher.
Those are some wonderful examples that other leaders will listen to. And trust me, when the teachers hear this, they're going to go to their principals. And so you may be getting some emails about, why did you have to say all that? Now I have to do the same thing. Let's talk about families. You know, one group of people who were really impacted were families, particularly those where you had one income household earner who all of a sudden either had to work part-time or had to work shifts because someone had to be home. There's a childcare crisis that kind of knew about, but it really did. What have you done, examples of what have you done to help a parent or families deal with not only the child being home, but some of the economic and challenges that they were having themselves? Because that's one segment that we haven't really talked a lot about. And again, it's an open question for anyone in the group.
Well, in our schools, we have food pantries in each of our schools that are run by our chaplains in schools. And we found that our parents used those regularly, and we were glad that they did. We also kept track of some of the food cards that the state gives out that are tied to school attendance. And so we kept track of any of the parents who were having issues with that because of the strange way attendance was being taken. And so we fielded a lot of things there. All of our students get free breakfast and lunch. And so when students had to be quarantined, we made sure that we contacted the parent and we packaged up a week's worth of breakfast and lunch for them that they could then drive by, pick up literally like a drive-through window and take it back home when their students were not technically in school, but doing virtual school. And then we also provided some counseling services, as well as the chaplains that we have were always willing to contact families, parents, do home visits for spiritual support. And so we did find that parents were very grateful for these extra kinds of things, recognizing how difficult being home and often being without the level of work that they had previously been able to do.
Thank you.
We did a couple of things as well. All of our campuses, along with all of CPS, also provided meals every single day for families to come pick up at the school every single day, Monday through Friday, as was needed. But one thing that we specifically did, we also partnered with an organization called Gourmet that single-handedly, delivered food to my school, to my campus. I have 600 students. They personally delivered food to 500 of those families that signed up I believe it was every 3 days, and they gave them enough meals to last 3 days. That was really, really huge. Another thing that we did at our school was we also, because we were not able to go on like field lessons and things of that nature, we repurposed that money in our budget, and I set aside about $10,000 for when we just purchased goods and just allowed our families to come, detergent, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer, paper towels, whatever they needed. And we opened up our school for about 4 hours a day, and we just let parents to come shop, like whatever you need. And that was huge. And we also, let they can come back multiple, like you can come in as much as you want. Like we didn't put caps or limits on it. And I think that was really, really, really powerful for our families as well. And not obviously, but also because particularly during the virtual part, some of our families didn't have the luxury of not going to work. We also offered night classes to our families that needed that option as well. It wasn't a lot, but it went a long ways to say, like, we're going to do whatever it takes for you during this time. And so that was really, really powerful for our families as well.
Thank you.
I think in our context, one thing that we saw a need as it related to families was the majority of our families were still working. Our parents were still working, but the challenge came with the fact that they were still working. Mm-hmm. And when you are virtual or whatever the case may be, we began to see how hard it was for families to manage their workload. And if you think of like a young elementary student who can't upload their own assignments and, can't always just get online themselves, it was just becoming a lot for them and making sure that their students were doing what they needed to do and when they needed to do it. And that's it takes a balance, right? Because there's certain things that we need from students and families to be able to do our job. But at the same time, we began to recognize the heavy stressor that was on them. So we sat down as a faculty and really looked at policies, right? Like, what is our assignment policy? How are we working with this? How are we communicating with families? What flexibility are we going to have for families so that they can, we had a family, for example, where they had multiple children, everybody's supposed to be online and both parents are working. They couldn't support all the children mm-hmm. at one time and do that. So the teacher recorded school. And the child was able to do it later in the evening when a parent was available to sit down with them, right? Mm-hmm. So it was just about being aware of the individual needs of families and seeing what commonalities are we seeing and being flexible and creating new policies and things of that nature that could help support them. Furthermore, we wanted to continue, as has been said here by both, that the excellence in what we were doing as best we could. So one thing we established early on was what we call at-home kits. So literally everything that you would need to do all of the lessons for however long, like a quarter, the teachers put in so much time and created these kits. I'm talking about even down to art, paint brushes, like anything that you need to get this done. We provided, and as has been mentioned here multiple times, these are budgetary decisions, right? Like mm-hmm. This is not stuff that we were doing before. If we had paintbrushes, you just need a one class set, wash those suckers, and the next class can use them. Now you're talking about buying paintbrushes for everybody and paint for everybody. Mm-hmm. But what we understood was if we want to continue to support children in the way that we want to and support families, so they're not running around to all the stores trying to get all the things, let's provide this for them to take off some of this load that is trying to help your child during this time. Also just teachers and administrators being approachable, right? Like helping families to know we understand this is different. Talk to us, communicate with us. We're here. What do you need and how can we support you? And so that kind of was how we navigated through that space. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting that at the same time, parents were trying to do the same thing for us. We had, as I mentioned to you all before, the option, like parents can choose, send your child or stay home. And there were some families that we noticed that the children virtual, I know my other school leaders know, virtual was not it. Like, not it. They're not getting online. They're not doing anything. They needed to be in the building, but we didn't know how to communicate that without families feeling like we're saying, you need to send, put your child at risk and send them. That's a delicate conversation. Only to discover that after some of the families had conversations with the teachers, the families were saying, we were trying to protect you. We were trying to protect you as the teachers by not getting one more child in your room that could potentially expose you to COVID, right? So we had this relationship with everybody is trying to protect everybody, which talks about, which speaks to the core values that we have at our school as it relates to we're all in this thing together. But when we dialogue and discuss, we can make best decisions for as best we can for everybody. So that's kind of what it looked like with families for us.
All the examples that you provided is entrepreneurship like squared, because you had to do things that weren't in your budget when it was approved, either at the city level coming down, the Oregon's nonprofit level, or for you at the private schools when you had to go to your board or whoever's in charge. That money wasn't there. And so you're showing the role of entrepreneurship and leadership. Anybody who's been in a leadership position know that you don't take it because you want to be popular. Anyone who tells you that, they haven't been in leadership very long. Without giving names per se or anything like that, what's one of the toughest decisions you've had to make as a leader? And what did you draw on from your own experience, professional, personal, or otherwise, that made you say this is the right thing to do during this time period?
I'm trying to think, ooh.
It's a pretty good question.
Because as I'm hearing you talk, you've definitely had to do it. And in leadership, we often don't want to be vulnerable with each other because that often is seen as a sign of weakness, when in fact, if anything, we should be vulnerable with each other at this point.
Yeah.
And so people, I'm sure, have been in the same situation. I just would be glad to hear what you had to go through.
I can speak to a recent example last week. We were blessed, let me say, last year to never have, as was mentioned at my friend's school in Chicago, we didn't have one COVID case come in the building all year last year. And, we have the protocols and everything in place, all the safety things, distancing, masking, all of that. And so, going into this year, that's our prayer once again. We don't want any positive cases, but I did get a notification from a parent who let me know, okay, my child tested positive. And so for me, and any school leader, that's a big, we've been in this thing for a while, but when you get that message, that means a lot of things. That means the contact tracing, who are you with, blah, 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 all of that. And so I had to discuss with my board chair and my superintendent and talk about this. And, there are schools, just full transparency out there, that I know that are making some different decisions, right? Oh, a child has COVID, but we don't want to have to shut down, and we don't want to, it's too much. And so you just try to make it work and massage it, right? But our families have been so thankful and have trusted us so much and have lauded us for what we have done to keep our children safe and our faculty safe over the last year. But the decision had to be made. Are we going to close for any period of time? Are we shifting into virtual? Who are the blah, 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 blah. So we had to, just due to multiple reasons, we had to make the decision. I had to send this email. I almost wanted to vomit, but I had to send this email that said, we will be virtual next week, out of abundance of caution, without going into details. No, I will not tell you who, all of that stuff. We, after reviewing the situation, recognized that was the best decision for the safety of our faculty and for our students. But that is difficult in the, first month or so of school to send that email out, because there's a ripple effect to that, right? I got a text message not too many days later, not from a parent, not from anyone who works at my school or anything of that nature, just within the community, knows people who knows people. Oh, I heard you had an outbreak at your school.
Mhm.
No, we did not have an outbreak at our school.
Mhm.
We had a situation, but we made a decision. It's a tough decision and it's hard and everyone's not going to get it. And I've got pushback from, most parents were happy, but that's a whole situation, right? So that's just one recent example of that was a tough decision that I knew could have multiple types of results, i.e. rumor, i.e.,
Mhm.
people saying, I don't have child, what am I supposed to do with my child at home? How are they supposed to get their laptop? All those things. So that's one example for me recently. But it worked out fine and we're back and we made the right decision, period.
Thank you. Ellen, let's kick it to you.
I've learned over all these years that no matter what you do, someone will not like it. And so you have to be really sure of who you are and what you believe and willing to act on that, and have integrity, because you will find times where it's very, very difficult. And if you don't understand what you believe about children, education, your staff, all of that, those kind of decisions are very, very difficult. When you do know, and you're making the right decision for the right reasons, then it does make that decision much easier to make, and you are more settled with that decision, such as the one I just made about going to masking again. It was great not having to wear a mask, but I had to make the decision knowing that some parents would be upset, students would be upset, and strangely as it seemed, we had the same situation of all of these rumors going around that we had massive outbreaks, which we didn't. And so there it is, and you just have to act in the best interest of the students and the families.
Thank you. Rashid.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ellen. I think, those times when you have to make those tough decisions, I believe I stated this previously, you have to be rooted and grounded in, I believe, your values, what you hold true, and you have to stick to that. And then I think your decision-making principles. I think when those two things are aligned, I don't think you ever make a quote unquote bad or wrong decision. It may not be a popular decision. It may not be something like decision everybody wants you to make, but nobody can say you've made a wrong or a bad decision in that regard. And I think one decision or moment that we had, similar to what was already stated. We knew we were going to do the mass and things of that nature, but a popular or a decision that needed to be made was around something I talked about earlier around, again, with safety as our number one decision-making principle, whether or not we should, I think some of you were talking about this, whether or not we should, if a student had to quarantine, do we quarantine the whole class, the whole school? What do we do? But again, we had to make that decision, and what we came up with was, like I think I said this, like we have seating charts in every single class. And the reason it's not a popular decision because one, the teachers didn't want to make all those seating charts. We have one for every class, for arrival, for dismissal, for if they're on the carpet, at the tables, whatever it is. And so it was unpopular because some of the teachers didn't agree with it. Well, we need to close the whole pod and do all this other stuff. But we've been able to mitigate any outbreak. And actually, we haven't had a case yet. But any student that needed to quarantine, we were able to really to keep safety, to keep safety, but to also remember that kids need to be in school. We just totally. They need to be in school. And so we had to wrestle with those two things. But I am glad to report that we're still able to keep everybody safe, and we're still able to deliver on the promises of educating our children at the same time. And that was a tough one. It was a tough one because, like you said, teachers are worried, parents are worried. But again, so far, We've been able to mitigate any type of we haven't had any outbreaks. We haven't had any cases. We know we're not going to eliminate cases, but we've been able to mitigate any cases by keeping safety as our number one priority, but also remembering that we are in the business of educating kids and they need to be in school. And so I made the decision with those two things in mind, and so far it's working out pretty well.
Thank you.
Gerard, do you mind if I say something about that?
Absolutely.
Like, as we're talking about like decision making and leadership, one thing that I found, and I think I hear you all saying it even implicitly, is that when you are prepared, right, and proactive, protocols, this, that, and the other, where it's clear that we're not making decisions on whims or opinions. Like we sat down and were as proactive as we could be and established protocols and things of that nature. And now we are carrying out the plan that we sat down to create with stakeholders and things of that nature. And now as the leader, not only am I feeling more comfortable because I believe in what I'm about to say or communicate, but this was, it doesn't always happen this way, but a lot of times it is rooted in what we have established and said we were going to do and be and how we were operate. So I hear you actually talking about, safety is our number one priority. I don't even work at your school, but after this hour, I know what your number one priority is at your school. It's clear, right? And so communication is so important. When I sat down to construct that email and understood what the series of emails would be, right? Like, you can't tell me you got text messages, emails, all the things, so that I'm clearly articulating what we did. This is a link to our plan that establishes our protocol, all of that, because in leadership, we're making tough decisions, as you guys have said. But from what I hear from both of you, you guys didn't just sit there and say, this is what I want to do. I believe in it. We're going to do it. But it's rooted in something deeper than that. And you knew how to communicate it. And the process of getting it out there and who had to buy into it and all of that. I think sometimes, as you were saying, Gerard, if you haven't made a tough decision as a leader, we're questioning the leadership. But furthermore, it's about learning how to communicate that and be prepared for the what ifs. And that's really what changes the game when you're having to make these tough decisions. The what I don't want to deal with is not necessarily the decision. I just now have to now start to respond to some emails that are probably going to come my way, or a phone call from somebody that probably is not going to like it. That's the stuff that I don't really want to have to deal with, but I'm not questioning what I have to do. It's like, what is this going to look like in a minute? And I just wanted to throw that.
Yeah, but some of the power in that is that because you know what you stand on and what you believe, you're able to control the narrative, and nobody can tell you did something that you didn't believe in. So I just want to say that.
Correct. No, you're right. That's 100% right. Like, we get to control that narrative. Say what you want to say. If somebody chooses to fact check, if somebody actually wants to know the true information and fact check and have that conversation and send that email and make that phone call, then they will hear, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. That's what we did. Here's what it was rooted in and established in. This is what we believe. And this is our practice, not just my feelings in the moment. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
These are all good points for us to wrap up just some closing thoughts about leadership. I want to start with you, Ellen. You've mentioned you've been in this 40 years. So you've had a chance to work public and private. You've been a superintendent. You now run. You got principals working for you. Couple of sentences. What do you want to leave people who've worked, you've worked public and private, but there's some leaders, there's some lessons about leadership that are just high level, independent of that, particularly at the superintendent or overseeing level. What are some words you want to say to some of your colleagues who'll be watching this?
I would say, again, be an authentic leader. Know what you believe, be willing to act on it, have some internalized morality, and remember that the promises we make to parents are serious, and we need to be doing what we promise. And with that, I'm sorry, but I have another engagement. So
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. So let's go to you, Summer. You've worked public and now you've shifted over to private. There's some things both public and private leaders can learn. Same question for you. What are your some of your?
I think one of my, and there's so many things, but some key things for me is one, always be willing to always be a learner. That's been so powerful for me, which is I am in a constant state of being willing to make adjustments when it's time to make adjustments. If we are not doing what's best for children, teach me. I'm ready to adjust. And I try to instill that into my faculty. And I tell them all the time, I am not stuck on anything. If the curriculum is not working and we've tried it and we're doing it and we're doing it and we're doing it or whatever it is, if it's not working, we got to pivot, right? So being willing to be flexible and always having like this learner mindset to me is one of the key things that has, one, kept me in this work. And two, that I think has been most powerful for my context, whether public or private, is just that I'm willing to say, I don't know something, I want to know something, and I want this to help impact my kids. So show me the ways.
Thank you. And Rashid, you were in Newark, you're in Chicago, you've been in traditional public schools, you've been in charter. A lot of principals like you, majority of our children will be in traditional public schools for the foreseeable future. We've got to make sure they're doing some great things. What lessons from both your traditional and charter lens can you share with leaders in the public sector writ large?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that come to mind. I think one, Summer definitely hit on the head. Always be reflective in your practice. Always reflect. Always be willing to engage in deep reflection, because leaders are the first learners. I couldn't agree more. Leaders are the first learners, and you have to be willing. You can't. This is not a job where you could ever say I got it or I've mastered it, because there's always something that you need to learn and be better at. I think the second thing for me is leadership is about leadership is servanthood. You have to be, if you want to be a leader, you have to know that you have to be prepared to be in the service of others. You have to be willing to serve in any capacity at any time for anybody. Leadership is not about you. It's actually about everybody else that you serve. Yeah. And the truth in leading is knowing that no matter the position that I hold, I still see myself in you. And if every leader led like that, no child will ever feel marginalized, ostracized, or any type of way. No family will feel misplaced or not wanted. No child will walk away in despair, but they will actually be living with this concept of hope and love. If you're willing to actually serve. If you're not willing to serve, I would say don't be a leader. That's public, that's private, that's anything. And I think another thing is you have to be unapologetically who you are. You cannot be somebody that you're not. If you're going to be a leader, serving any population, anywhere, you have to know that you've been preparing for that role your entire life. Everything you've been through, every circumstance, every situation, every bad time, every good time, it has prepared you to be the person that you are, which has prepared you to be the leader that you've been called to be. And so for me, I think you have to know that whatever you do, you have to be able to say, I am who I am. I'm not gonna change who I am or become something I'm not, but I'm going to stand on my beliefs. I'm going to stand on my principles. I'm going to stand on what got me here. But I got to be willing to serve, and I got to be willing to be reflective in my practice.
Thank you. Well, let me thank both of you and really all four of you who at one point were on board for having this conversation of back to school. You talked about what it was like to be an entrepreneur, what it was like to have to pivot, what it was like to be a leader. Dealing with real world challenges. We have a lot of sideline pontificators who are talking about what they would do or what people should do. You're you're on the field. And that's really important work. We'll also note that since you mentioned you call it HIB, Historical Black Institute for your School.
Oh, yeah, it's sort of about HBI.
Yeah, the three of us are actually graduates of HBCUs. Again, my name is Gerard Robinson. Thank you for your time. And for our founder, Dr. James Hunter, one of the things he talked about is the importance of networks. And one word that I pull away from this conversation is network, what people are doing with families, each other, public sector, private sector. This is the kind of work that we do. Until we get together again next month, thank you for your time and look forward to another conversation. Take care, everyone.